Hello and welcome back to another video, and thank you for your patience. I am back-ish from my medical leave, which I've announced on a YouTube community section, which is that I had a wisdom tooth infection for the past week or so, past week and a half, and it caused so much swelling that I couldn't. I basically couldn't open up my mouth. I couldn't eat anything properly. I had to consume a lot of liquid foods. And that also means I was unable to record a video last week because half my face was literally twice the size of this side of the face. But nevertheless, I am feeling much better now. I'm definitely feeling a lot more in the zone, and my brain finally started coming back online. So I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about a really, really interesting topic today, which pertains to personality and defining your reading tastes. But before we get to that topic, just a bit of housekeeping. Next week, we're also going to take next week off because as we're recording this, today's Wednesday, the 21st of May. I'm going into wisdom tooth extraction surgery next Tuesday, which means I'm going to need an extra week or two to recover from the extraction. But while we have time here in this interim period, I'm going to figure out a way to really pad out the content schedule to really give you guys some food for thought during that period. So that's a potential another potential week off on the horizon, just for me to fully get this wisdom teeth situation out of the way. But also, about 2 weeks ago, I started a project that I'm really, really proud of. Actually, two projects. Number one is a Notion template, Syntopicon, which my team and we've been developing this template for a little while now. And we're really happy to launch this template in the coming days. And some of you guys have already signed up for the expression of interest form, which I'm going to link again in the video description of this video. So sign up for that expression of interest form if you want to receive that template on day one. So we're finalizing some of the back-end stuff right now. We're trying to make sure the landing page looks perfect. We're trying to make sure to record a tutorial video to teach you guys how to use this template, and we really want to develop this all-in-one syntopical notebook situation for you to play around with. So if that's what you're interested in, link in the description, first thing in the description down below. And another thing is, on my Substack page 2 weeks ago, we started a series called Giving Away My English Degree. So in this writing series, so every week I'm basically gonna send you a long article with one big idea and two journaling prompts to really help you consolidate your reading skills. And from last week from a fortnight ago, I decided to start a series called Giving Away My English Degree. So the format of it's basically every week we're going to cover something that you would learn from a college level literature class. So I'm literally digging out all of my reference material. I'm literally digging out all my notes from my university days. And I'm just going to lay out all the things that I've learned from my degree. And you can check that out. Also, link in the description down below. This is something I've been pouring my heart and soul into. And a lot of you guys who are subscribed to the newsletter, you guys have been enjoying that quite avidly. So I would like to give you the opportunity to be a part of this exchange. So anyway, those are the housekeeping out of the way. I don't want to waste too much time on the housekeeping, but so yeah, a potential missing video next week, and there's the template that's coming. And of course, we started a new series called Giving Away My English Degree on my Substack. So check them out. And now let's dive into today's video. So the main thing that I want to address today, which is a thing that I've been noticing a lot on the internet, especially when you trail through Substack or when you start to browse the internet in the book talk sphere or in the booktube space or on the Substack book sphere, there's this tendency for people to identify with certain kinds of reading material, to identify with certain genres. So I'm the kind of guy, for example, I'm the kind of guy who loves reading Dostoevsky. Or all of a sudden, everyone's reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Or all of a sudden, everyone is obsessed with Sally Rooney. So you have these sects that intersect between personalities and the kind of books that they're reading. And of course, the sphere extends into things like printing printing silly stuff on t-shirts, all the way to being a fierce defendant of certain genres of books or while trashing other genres of books, right? So reading on the internet, at least, has gradually turned into something that you do in your spare time as a kind of a private exercise into something that can be formed into an identity that can be broadcasted, defended, identified, and of course, you can wage a war with this kind of reader's identity. So if anyone were ever to call your tastes into question, if anyone were to ever tell you, hey, you probably shouldn't read that, you pull out your pitchforks. You start to fight with the person verbally. You start to leave them nasty comments. So as you can see, this is quite an interesting phenomenon. This is quite an interesting thing that I did not expect to really cover. And I think this also cuts into a really fundamental problem with how the internet works or how media works, is that only the things that are visible get traction. Only the things that are blatantly obvious get the kind of coverage that they don't really deserve. And it is precisely the case, and this is precisely the case with reading culture on the internet. It's just the case that if there's a book that you simply do enjoy and you struggle to put that into something visible, it's automatically ignored. Whatever works is what disappears into the background. And a lot of us, if we find a really interesting book, our first instinct is to convert that into some sort of sellable soundbite to talk about it on the internet. It's either like, okay, this book is the best out of all of them to create that kind of media traction, right? So whatever is visible is what's blatantly obvious. But whereas the subtler tastes that you might have, they tend to fade into the background. It's really hard to fully articulate the reading experience on a forum like the internet. And it's really hard to really flesh out why you love a certain genre or why you love a certain book with this culture of clickbait, with this culture of rage baiting, right? So you have to say something really controversial about a certain book, or you really have to lean into a very one-sided argument to even get your name heard on the internet. So that's something I've been noticing. And that kind of cuts into my recent experience with medicine. So after I got sick, I refused to go to the doctors. I fully believed that this infection is just going to go away on its own. It's not that big of a deal. And I refused to see a dentist because on the one hand, it was quite expensive to go visit a dentist. But on the other hand, I just didn't want to, I have a fear of going to the dentists. And I don't think I'm the only one who share that fear. But anyway, those two factors kind of kept me away from the clinic. But then something really strange started happening. I started to notice that as I was getting better under my antibiotics treatment, what started to happen is that as I started to recover from the pains and swellings that I was facing, I started to notice that, man, I completely took that health, or when I was not suffering from this pain or this ailment, I completely took my health for granted because that was my default state, right? And whatever is healthy with you tends to really get ignored. If you're just like living your life, your brain space is freed up to worry about all this other shit when you're not sick. And it is only when you're sick do you really start to wonder to yourself, man, I wish, God, wouldn't I kill for a day without any pain? Wouldn't I kill for just a nice stroll around the block? Because I couldn't do that because I was so ridden with this infection. I was ridden with fever, and I was feeling lethargic, and everything else that came with feeling sick. Wouldn't I kill to get rid of all of that just to enjoy a sunny afternoon outside on a terrace drinking a coffee, right? So whatever works tends to becoming visible, and health is a prime example. And personality is also one of these cases where whatever is a part of your personality tends to fade into your everyday life. It tends to become automatic so that your brain is freed up to worry about all the other things in your life. So this is how I'm going to cut into, we're going to return to how this relates to reading in a second. But this is why it is actually really, really hard to stand staunchly on one subject specifically, or to stand by a genre of books so staunchly. It's because whatever it is that you think you're into and whatever it is that are working in your life, they tend to become quite opaque, or they tend to just become your operating principle that you don't even spend much time thinking about. So, but whereas in the case of personalities, whatever is the most visible, or whatever that personality it is that you cling the strongest to, whatever it is that you really want yourself to become, that tends to be at times, most of the times, inauthentic. So I was at a gathering, I think 2 months ago, at this jazz owner's apartment. So Melbourne's got a pretty interesting jazz scene, and I know one of the owners from one of these jazz clubs, and he invited my partner and I over to a little gathering. So we met this. I think he was a saxophone player. We met the saxophone player, and he said to me recently, one of his friends turning to one of these people who declares to the public that he thinks he's a funny person. So he gets mad when people don't laugh at his jokes. He gets mad when there's evidence from the external world that contradicts his self-image. So here you have a case of a self-defined identity. Or in the words of Byung-Chul Han, the Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han, this is an act of self-reference. And it is extremely easy to do nowadays, because I think right now you can ascribe, or you can come up with a category for any kinds of personality, right? So the finance bro with a puffer vest who drinks a latte every morning. So that could be a personality category that's quite visible. Or the cottagecore mid-30s something millennial who wishes to do nothing more than to drink black coffee and to listen to Hozier. That becomes an aesthetic personality category. Or someone who's like a law student who only drinks black coffee and stays up past 3 a.m. listening to Chopin, right? So you have all these things that are really visible, and that sort of sets the frame for how we talk about ourselves. And there's a book that I really enjoyed recently, and I actually interviewed the author after reading this book, called Collapse Feminism. And this book by Alice Capel, another YouTuber, she basically articulated that the way that we're kind of fragmenting this discourse of personality is actually quite antithetical to an authentic discovery of who people are. And she sort of went into this whole exploration of the it girl, or the French girl aesthetic, or basically all these subcategories on the internet, or like the red pill gym bro. So she went into this whole exploration of all these subcultures and sub-identity types. That was just super interesting to read. But the point here is that whatever is the most visible that you can stand behind, whatever personality that you think like I want to be that, or I need to be that, and you put in a lot of effort into being that thing, by definition, that's kind of you forcing yourself into a category that you don't really belong. Whereas true personality, and a true discovery process into who you really are, usually comes from a combination of life experiences, a combination of you really diving deep in yourself after a challenging period in your life, you really introspecting after facing a failure. And typically, they tend to surprise you. For example, a random situation comes up and you found yourself responding in a way that's quite courageous. So, and then you note that down and you're like, okay, I can see how that situation triggered this part of me. That's actually quite courageous. I did not expect that from myself. Or conversely, there could be a situation where you think to yourself, God damn it, I should have done something in that situation. I should have called that guy out when he's being an asshole. I should have really stood my ground in that argument. So there are these situations that kind of serve as mirrors, but the point here is they're reflections from the external world, and your ego has to be tested by the external world's attempt to resist the shape of your ego. And you can only define the edges of your personality if you have something to push against. So your identity is, in a sense, defined negatively. It's not it's not defined positively, like I am this kind of person. So from tomorrow, I decide that I'm gonna become a funny person. So every one of you better believe that I'm a funny person. Whereas true humor is something like you walk out there to a bar and then you talk to a bunch of your colleagues, and they just start laughing for no reasons, right? And then from that evidence from the external world, you start to identify your personality negatively. You receive feedback and you're like, oh, that's how I come across to people, not this attempt of thinking of a thing that you want to become and then projecting it out there into the world, forcing the world to agree with you. So that process is quite interesting. And what typically happens is that whatever it is that's the most authentic to you, they will come out in the most unexpected ways. They're going to find you in the most unmediated ways. And when you do find them, they tend to become invisible parts of your personality. They tend to just melt into how you encounter situations and how you face certain conflicts and how you tolerate successes and failures, right? And that's how personalities get built. And there's a danger for especially younger people on the internet to basically subscribe to certain archetypes and to work towards those archetypes without any kinds of external resistance, because the internet, it is the perfect self-reference machine. If you think you're a certain person, you bet your ass your algorithm is going to feed you with hundreds of videos reaffirming that identity, right? And now you are afraid to go outside. You're afraid to be challenged. Your identity is afraid to get challenged. That's why you see a lot of people get really defensive whenever someone threatens their sense of self, because their personalities have never been tested through external pressures, through external feedback in a negative fashion. And that's how we really can start to develop a stronger personality, which is through encountering external resistance and to not shy away from these challenges. And over time, you'll get a firmer and firmer grasp on how you relate to the world, on how you sort through interpersonal relationships, and what kind of real tastes that you have. It's kind of like a good analogy is sometimes you tend to just like songs on Spotify, right? And my favorite playlist is actually my liked songs playlist, because I know I just tend to like whatever it is that I'm listening to. If I really like something, I'll just click add to my favorites. And if I sort through my favorites list, in retrospect, there might be a trend emerging. I like rock, I like jazz, I like 60s music. All these trends start to emerge, and it kind of creates this kind of personality of someone who's got a bit of an older soul, of someone who likes some stuff that's a bit older. For someone who prefers a calmer melody, for someone who likes a bit of classical music, but all that stuff is in retrospect. You have to first of all have lived that life experience. You have to first of all listen to all the stuff. You have to first of all let your experience negatively inform who you are as a person. So now we're going to make a return to the earlier point, which is reading. How does all of this relate to your reading tastes? Well, just like your personality, a lot of the times your tasting reading is defined negatively. A lot of the times, you don't just get into a book because you want to become a certain person who reads that book, right? So you think to yourself, I am that intense person who likes to force my way through really complicated poetry. Or you think to yourself, I'm going to become that kind of person who's really well-read in history. So you go off reading all the history books to construct this caricature of someone who reads history books. But more often than not, if you can bring back a piece of memory from one of your first reading experiences or one of your first favorite books of yours, what you're going to realize is that you're so busy immersed among the pages that you barely even have any time to think about how you're coming off to other people. You don't even have any time to really defend your choices. Sometimes, you like it because this is a gift from your mother for your birthday. Sometimes you like a book because your dad read it to you before you went to bed. Sometimes you really love a book because just by sheer chance, you bumped into it at a library or you found a copy in a secondhand bookshop and you just were completely drawn into the story and you disappeared into the story. There's not a lot of this kind of second guessing yourself. It's just like, ooh, this is not the kind of book I would read. The kind of person like me, I would not read that book. I am too beyond just silly crime fiction novels. I'm simply too beyond reading this silly speculative fiction here. And you think to yourself, it doesn't conform with my personality. But whereas if you let all those categories go, whereas if you let all of those preconceptions of yourself go, And if you stop the self-referencing, and if you get off the internet for a little while, I know how ironic that sounds, given that you're probably watching this clip on the internet. If you just spend a bit of time and to find that original feeling of being totally immersed in a book automatically, just like your Spotify playlist, just like how you would search for music just on a whim, and all of a sudden you end up with a playlist that's a smorgasbord between jazz, rock, and classical music, and a bit of rap. You're also going to find that in your reading tastes. It shifts and turns. It takes on maybe 1 week you're reading something like a David Baldacci novel, and another week you're reading a biography of Alexander Hamilton, and another week you're reading something completely different, right? So you kind of have this smorgasbord happening. Whereas for someone who's obsessed with how they're coming off to other people when they read a certain genre of books, for someone who's completely obsessed with being a certain person or kind of person, and for someone who's really into self-reference, you're going to realize that their tastes are not that interesting. You can predict their reading lists. You can kind of know that they probably got phenomenology of spirit on their shelves. You kind of know that they claim to love Dostoevsky. You kind of know that they've read Meditations, and you kind of know that they claim to love Jane Eyre. So there's just this kind of numb repetitiveness with a completely consistent reading schedule or a completely consistent reading list, right? Whereas if you treat reading as something that should melt into your life, this is the final shooting match. You should treat reading as something that seamlessly melts into your life, where you find a discipline and a time to dip into something that you're really interested in. To find something that really speaks to you, you have to have the courage to not show it off to other people. You have to have the courage to maybe entertain the thought of like, this is only for me, and this is going to remain invisible to the public. And there's probably not going to be a lot of people who agree with me, but I'm going to enjoy it anyway because I am too busy reading this book. And I just simply don't have time to create a personality out of this book. I just simply don't have the time to invent something that I wish that I could read or wish that I am more interested in to fulfill this kind of personality category. And that is how you build in more authentic reading time. And if you truly embrace this way of thinking about reading as something that's supposed to melt into your life, like health, right? Or like who you are as a person. And if you completely embrace reading as a supplement to your life and not as a personality that you should show off to other people, you're going to find so much more authentic motivation to read. You won't struggle with reading motivation anymore. And a large part of reading motivation is that people actually deny what they're really interested in just to play into the image of a reader. And I think that's completely unnecessary. And the correct way to do this is to have the courage to say, this is only meant for me, and I am too busy getting lost among the pages to create a caricature out of myself. And that is the main message of this week's video, and I hope that you have enjoyed it thoroughly as much as I enjoyed recording this episode for you guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care, and Robin Walden here, wishing you a happy morning, happy evening, happy days, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.